Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goosejunkies. Tonight we're doing episode 14, 14 for the 14th of February, which is Valentine's Day. Yes, this is our Valentine's Day special. Tonight we're going to be discussing two episodes from two iconic kids horror series. We're going to be comparing an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode with the Haunting Hour episode. For Haunting Hour, we are doing Terrible Love. And for Are You Afraid of the Dark, we are doing The Tale of the Last Dance. Tonight, I am joined with BD Horror and Goosebumps Enthusiast. How are y'all two doing tonight?
Yo, 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 people of the night, and especially ladies of the night. It is your boy BD Horror, but enough about me. Tonight is the night of the BD Horrors. That's right. How you doing, ladies? Your girl better not watch this, otherwise she's not gonna be your girl no more. Shout out to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Terrible Love. That's what we're covering today, which reminds me a lot of my last Valentine's with Felicia, because I told her that I loved her and I wanted to take her back, and of course she told me, as eloquently put, go to hell. And then I told her that, like the GYG collection that she sold off, she could go check out at the Dead End Hotel. And then she kicked me in the nuts. So, anyway, today we're talking about love stories. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and I hope you guys are feeling romantic, because after you talk about these episodes, all love is dead. And yeah, that's all I have.
How are you doing tonight, Enthusiast?
I'm doing pretty good. Um, quick flex. Anyways, I'm ready. I'm really excited.
All right, all right. We couldn't have the whole panel on tonight. Spongy, he did send us his thoughts for the episodes, so we'll be including that in this. In Dummies and Ultimate just had some schedule obligations that they had to attend to somewhere else, so they did not attribute anything for this. So we just got some four takes for this episode. So it's going to be a little bit shorter, most likely. That's if we don't get into rambling too much. But all right, so let's start off with Haunting Hour. We're going to start off there with Terrible Love, and I'm going to pass it over to BD. BD, why don't you tell us about Haunting Hour and Terrible Love and how that fits into the show, and also what Terrible Love is about?
So, of course, Haunting Hour is a show that is consistently terrifying, consistently scary, and for some reason on the special holiday episodes, that's not the case. And this is one of them. We're going down that corny romance route. So, what is Terrible Love about? There's a girl named Maggie, and she's one of those invisible girls. She's looking for love. There's a handsome man in her chemistry class called Brendan, and he does not pay attention to her. Yeah, he does not care about her, does not know she exists, and she's in heartbreak. She's obsessed with him. She stares at him every day, and she hopes that, he'll notice her one day. And what ends up happening is she becomes distracted, and there ends up being a chemical explosion that happens in the chemistry lab, all because she was daydreaming about her not so hubby. And amongst this explosion, when she's knocked to the floor, she wakes up and sees Cupid, who's played none other than my boy, David DeLuise, who, for those who don't know, he played the dad in Wizards of Waverly Place, which is one of my favorite sitcoms of all time. Shout out to Wizards of Waverly Place. And he basically tells her, you know what? You got zero riz. You can't get this man. He doesn't know you exist. He don't even know what you look like. But I can strike a business deal with you. And he's looking dapper just like I am tonight. And he basically says, you know what? I got these arrows. You know who I am. I'm Cupid. And with this chemical formula, if I landed on him and he sees you first thing when he wakes up, he's going to fall in love with you. And at first, she thinks that she's hallucinating. She thinks she might have gone into the afterlife. She thinks this may be a joke. But as time progresses, she realizes no, there may be more than meets the eye. This may be the deal of a lifetime. Now, does she make a deal with the devil? Well, as the story continues, she gets her wish. However, she ends up abusing the power. She ends up making a terrible mistake, and it ends up going down Terrible Love, which is quite potentially dangerous and more than she could ever expected. And that's basically the episode premise without spoiling too much. Now, what do I think about this episode? This episode is corny, cliche, and will throw you off if you didn't know anything about Haunting Hour. But the fact that this episode basically reminds me a lot of like a Disney Channel original movie or a Disney Channel sitcom kind of makes it lessen the blow. And I did have a fun time watching this. As cringy as the scenes are, they make me laugh out loud. especially the opening scenes with Maggie and Brendan. She talks to herself in the locker. When she's talking to Cupid, it's almost like she's being schizophrenic. People don't know that there's a person in front of her. They think she's talking to herself. She embarrasses herself all the time. And then there's this nerdy guy always eating chips behind her that wants her attention as well. So you got this triangle of love that's not going so well. And it's just fun to watch. I mean, if you don't take it seriously, you're gonna laugh at how bad some of the scenes are. Um, and when you get to Cupid, I think Cupid is an effective villain. I'm gonna say quote villain, because really he's this deity figure. David DeLuise does a great job. He's very charming, very funny, very witty. In a similar fashion to a villain like Carl Nav. Carl Nav, rocking a suit, super charismatic. You attracted to him. Same thing with Cupid here. And this is overall a good moral that you shouldn't abuse the power of love, and you shouldn't try to mess with people's feelings, because this actually reminded me of an episode I watched from My Babysitter's a Vampire, which is another one of my top three Disney sitcoms, which was basically about cologne. And the whole thing was they gave a love potion, you spray it on, you smell good, the ladies like you, and what ended up happening, the main character sprayed too much, and then they ended up having psychos come after him. And that's kind of what happens here. She abuses the power of love, and it ends up going into stalker territory and psychopathic boyfriends, and he tries hurting her, and he tries obsessing over her, and it gets quite creepy and uncomfortable, especially if any of you have dealt with obsessive people in the past. This is going to ring some PTSD, and this is going to get to you quite a bit. So yeah, I think it's a fun episode despite the cliches. I do have to say that the twist ending at the very end was so bad that it made me laugh out loud. But believe me, if you did not want to end your life up until the climax of the episode, you're gonna watch that twist ending and just contemplate what you just watched. But if you can look back at it and have a smile, I think you'll have a fun time. I give it a 6.5 out of 10. Is it great? No. Is it good? Eh. Is it fun? Yeah. If you like Disney Channel goofiness, if you like cheesy stuff, and if you're willing to experience something new that Haunting Hour usually would never do, you might have a fun time. But that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, great points, BD. I'll just chime in my thoughts before I pass over to Bruce. Um, I do think that this episode is a play on manipulation, and I feel like it doesn't quite lean into the commentary as much as it could have. And I think that if it did, it probably could have brought more substance to the story. And if they didn't go into the whole corny cliche bits and made it more of a character study on manipulation, I think that would have been a more riveting story. But that theme is there, but it's more of an undertone, in my opinion. I think this whole episode is just trope the episode, because it's a lot of the stuff that we see is so overdone, especially in romantic comedies or coming of age stories involving kids or young teens going through adolescence and having crushes on some other people. And for this episode, this one pretty much uses the most overblown one for girl main characters. She has a crush on a dumb jock, cute guy that is not a good match for her. A better match is actually friend zoned, and she hardly gives him the time of day. And then at the end, once she goes through all this trials and tribulations that she goes through and realizes that she doesn't want this guy the way she thought she did, she goes and settles and runs into the arms of the guy she friend zoned. But the twist, you know, makes her pay for that a little bit. Um, but yeah, there's nothing that you haven't seen in this episode before. And honestly, there's other movies on Disney Channel, ironically, that actually play up this trope way better and do a different take on it. One of the best examples of that is kind of this movie called Geek Charming, except it's more inverted, and that's what makes that movie smart. She gets paired up with a geek type instead of a geek, like a dreamy jock type. I mean, she does have a crush on one, but that's not who she's paired with the whole movie. So there are some subversions there in the genre, but this one is just been there, done that. There's nothing new here. It borrows a lot from Be Careful What You Wish For from Goosebumps. You have your buffoony helper or deity figure, which is Cupid, and Cupid does steal the show. He's definitely like a Brendan Fletcher from Lots of Luck that really boosts up points to this story. Otherwise, if he's not there, it's not the same product at all. So he is a scene chewer, but the material here He's pretty much a Clarissa clone. You've already seen that done before many times. And the characters just weren't that interesting, honestly. They're more cardboardy. It's whatever. But the execution and what they're going for, it's more silly, tongue in cheek. It ends up being fine. I gave this one like a 3.4 out of 5, which is a fine, okay. Nothing. It's not bad, but it's not good. It's just there. Definitely one of the more forgettable Haunting Hour episodes. It's only memorable for it being Valentine's theme. There's nothing to really take away from it. Maybe minus the manipulation stuff, but so that's my thoughts. And I'll pass it over to Bruce to see what he has to add. Oh, welcome in, Micah.
Hello.
Oh, I didn't thought you were coming in. All
No,
right,
but
we are joined. We are joined by Ultimate. I think he might have finished the episodes. We
Yep.
are currently in the first one. We're talking about Terrible Love, but we're on Bruce right now. Then we'll pass it over to you. Okay.
Okay.
So Bruce, what is your thoughts on Terrible Love?
Oh man, where do I begin? This was easily one of the worst kids' horror stories I've ever seen. To call it horror, although it does dabble into it at one point, is kind of just dumb. I mean, How I Learned to Fly, I feel like, is more horror, and this is about the least goosebumps feeling goosebumps book you can get, I guess. And basically down to how everything is shot, the characters, it's awful. I could not stand it. In the first few minutes, like you guys mentioned, there's this girl, and it's extremely awkward. You can tell this is probably a freshman, and it's like, why are you shooting a girl? She's like, cringe. That is cringe. I'm telling y'all. If someone came into my living room while I was watching that, I would act like I'm having a stroke. Marks Digital. Anyways, I could not stand this thing. Moving into the whole like Cupid subplot. All right, you know what? I like Cupid. He's a good actor here. I think he's actually the reason I gave this episode a score I did. Besides that, it's nothing works for me. I mean, this boyfriend is really odd. He's saying shit that is like extremely like I don't know how to say it, but it's like cutie patootie, that kind of stuff. All right, that is awful. I don't know what it is, but it is the worst things ever. And not only is he saying these really weird things, but he's also doing it while yelling. So it makes this like weird like angry and love situation, and it's just I have no words. I mean, it's hard to describe how bad this thing was. Though I will say, I like the story for what it tried to do. Like I said, I like Cupid, the actor. Besides that, nothing else works. I'm gonna have to give this probably a 3.5 out of 10. It is definitely one of the worst kids horror stories I have personally ever seen. It's hard to watch, honestly. I don't say that much, and I hate using that term, but it's genuinely hard to watch. Like I there was times if this wasn't for the podcast, I would have DNF'd that thing 5 minutes in.
You brought up something that reminded me. So I have some more things I want to chime in. The beginning of how she meets Cupid is one of the most weirdest ways to get a story rolling I've ever seen. It's the lab. She's in a chemistry lab and she puts the wrong chemicals in there. There's apparently dangerous gas that can make you pass out. She inhales the gas, right? She passes out. She meets Cupid. When she wakes up, the classroom never evacuated. They all just sat there. So you mean to tell me that she's the only one that passed out to the fumes in there? When you see the amount of smoke, it's kind of egregious. Before I get back to you, Bruce, I have another thing. I will say this. When the dude gets hit by the arrow a second time because she's worried that she's going to lose this guy, he actually becomes mildly creepy. Okay, he hands her a box with a tarantula in it, hoping that she gets bit with the love bug. It's playing on love bugs, kind of corny, but the way he acts in the climax is actually tense. I'm not gonna lie. Like, if I was her, seeing this crazed guy obsessed with me, chasing me down the hall, I would be petrified. I mean, I totally get it. But that's probably the height of scares of the entire episode. BD, you have something to add, and then we'll go to Bruce.
Yeah, I was gonna say two things. First of all, to add to that, there's nothing more iconic than when he ripped through that Valentine banner in the hallway and he said, "Come back, my little twig." I was like, that's actually iconic and creepy because I was like, this dude's a genuine psychopath right now. But I will say, when Brendan recited Romeo, I was watching this episode at the ninth floor at my college library. I almost opened the window and jumped out. No cap. That was the worst thing I ever saw in my life, and that's all I have to add.
Bruce, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something else?
Um, well, I will say this. Are we not going to talk about, like you kind of said, how this whole like meeting Cupid thing happens? The way this thing is shot had to have been like I can't express this enough without repeating the same shit, but it had to have been the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. At first, she's just kind of looking at him like sexually, and then as it goes on, when she's about to pour the thing in, it makes no sense why she's doing this either. She's like, "What was that for? What were the directors thinking? Who directed this thing? I want to know who wrote this too. This is so weird, and I just can't describe my feelings towards this thing. What is this girl? Probably 15 years old, I'd say."
Yeah, there's two writers on this. I think I quoted them in my review. I already forgot their names. It was like Greg something and Natalie something. I,
Ugh.
you know, I did say that, really. I was like, did you really go with this? I mean, who thought this was a kind of a good idea to put in this show? It feels really out of place. It kind of feels like a lost script to like a episode of like Sunny with a Chance or one of those Hannah Montana shows. Like, it felt like it could fit in that show as like a sitcom one-off episode, but in a haunting hour show, as a standalone episode. Why is this here? Um, yeah.
It would have been funny too if it was in like an actual like romantic comedy kind of thing. Like just some like little short thing that would maybe air on TV for Valentine's Day. Yeah, that's cool. What it ends up being is a haunted hour episode that's trying to be something it can't be, which is really shocking because it's from the same man who brought this book to Goosebumps. So, if we're really thinking about it, how, in my opinion, I'm saying, how did this end up so bad? That's like my general thought. I don't get it. I don't get any of the reasons people like this. And honestly, the whole "Come here, my little twig," that's just like unappealing to me. I don't find that like scary or even like disturbing. I just find that cringy. Like that's like the biggest thing with this episode. It is die hard cringe. That's my point.
Well, I think BD had kind of alluded to something before we passed it over to Micah. Um, BD, before we got on, you said that you think that this episode was trying to be bad on purpose, and I said, well, I have something to kind of like rebuke that. If it was trying to be, use the tropes in a smart way, I can totally see that they're trying to be bad on purpose because they're trying to accentuate the tropes. But it feels like here they were using the tropes as a crutch in terms of plot points, just so they can try to use parts of it to accentuate some horror. And none of it seems smart enough or aware enough to make me feel like I'm supposed to think it's so bad it's good. So BD, I want to hear your perspective before we pass it any further on why you think that it was bad on purpose.
The reason why I think that it's bad on purpose is because if you look at the portfolio of Haunting Hour, they have some of the most memorable and terrifying episodes. Like I can go off the top of my head: Dreamcatcher, Pumpkinheads, Brush with Madness. You got Headshot, you got Scarecrow, you got all this stuff, and they're all heavy hitters, and everyone remembers them. And even the average shows that we saw are still creepy. But if you notice, with all the holiday specials, if you look at Creatures Stirring, what was it? It was a Gremlins ripoff. If you look at Goodwill, that was a play on just rich people. That one was trying to be, I guess, a little bit more serious, but it dealt with all rich people kind of tropes and stuff. and this one is a holiday special for Valentine's, and it's just kind of like a love special. So to me, when you see episodes like this that are corny, and there's ones in Haunting Hour like this, if you've seen Bad Egg, if you've seen Pouf de Fromage, there's just these episodes that when you hear the producers get interviewed about it, they basically just say that they just did it to have a fun time. Like the guy who made Pouf de Fromage was interviewed, and he just said that we just had this random thought that aliens as cheese puffs would be fun, and we just decided to make it into an episode. So when you got plots that are just crazy and weird in a show that has consistently usually good, creepy, and scary stuff that people love, it's kind of hard to be like, oh yeah, they were trying to be serious with Pouf de Fromage. I can see it. The guys who made Dreamcatcher, Pumpkinheads, Really You, and Scarecrow, yeah, they knew that this was going to be a banger. Nah, they're just doing it to have fun. It's just like a little shoe in, like a filler episode, just to have a like fun time. I think they have to lay back and just have some goofy stuff. And then maybe it's because they think that Goosebumps and other kids horror and YA horror has goofy stuff, so they have to fit that in. I don't know the reason why, but that's just my perspective.
Another thing is, I didn't realize this, but when I was looking at IMDb earlier before I made my reviews, I saw that Peter DeLuise's brother, I think his name is David, he's a director and part of the portfolio of Haunting Hour. He directed a few episodes, so I'm like, that's how they managed to snag him in this show. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I don't know if Peter did this as a favor for his brother, or maybe he liked the script, or maybe it felt more in his wheelhouse. I don't know why he chose this one to do, but I'm actually thankful because we also touched on this too. A lot of the times in these more middling ones or the more average ones, you have saving grace acting performances from like really big names that people like. Well, I'm going to say big names, but relatively known names like a Brendan Fletcher or a Peter DeLuise, or you'll have an appearance from Christopher Lloyd. Just, well, I want to say Grandpires is to that level, but still, like, you have these actors just boosting up the quality of the episode in this show. Which is saying a lot. I think Nightmare Room similarly had a thing sometimes where you got starstruck with some people in the cast that make it seem a little bit better than it actually is. And this is one of those cases where Peter DeLuise does give a great performance and steals every scene that he's in and makes it fun for what it is. BD, you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I was gonna also add as well that you can also I think you can also tell which episodes are meant to be serious or not just by seeing who the big names are being typecasted as. Like if you look at Brendan Fletcher in Lots of Luck, you can tell that that one was meant to be serious because look at his performance. He's trying to be extra creepy. He's trying to play up the role of the leprechaun. And if you look at like Fear Never Knocks, Hayden Christensen, he's playing up this very like cool, creepy role. Look at David DeLuise in this episode and tell me if he acts any differently than he does as the father in Wizards of Waverly Place. So this is basically just right up his wheelhouse for how he normally acts in Disney sitcoms. And I think the same thing you can say for like let's say Christopher Lloyd, Grandpires. For any of you who've seen Grandpires, the role that he plays there is very similar to what the role he plays in When Good Ghouls Go Bad. So again, he played a role that was right up his wheelhouse, and it ends up being a more goofy story just for that reason. So I think that's also a key indicator.
All right. I think we had made some great points. Let's pass it over to Micah, and then we'll get into Spongy's thoughts on this episode. Micah, what did you think about Terrible Love?
Yeah, not one of the greatest Haunting Hour episodes. I think we can all kind of agree on that. I think there are worse, but it still was not good. I gave it a 4 out of 10 overall on my score. I think, like a lot of you guys said, there's nothing scary about it until the climax, and I do think the climax does get kind of tense with the way the boyfriend character acts. I do think that was pretty intense, and I do like that they tried to go that more intense route at the end, even if it didn't land the whole episode like it should have. And also Brendan, I think that was the boyfriend character's name. His acting was horrible. That was probably some of the worst acting I've seen in Haunting Hour. I think the main girl did a pretty good job acting-wise. I will say her acting wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. There's definitely worse. But then, as I said, Cupid, he stole the show. That guy was hilarious, I think. I smiled every time he was on screen just because he had such charisma and was just very entertaining. And just, again, he just ate up the camera in every scene he was in. You can just tell he was having a blast in the role.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's part of the reason why people are able to see the charm in it, at least, is because you can tell that he has a lot of charisma in the role, and that it's kind of infectious. Charisma is infectious. You can be the most bland thing ever, but if you have that one standout character, it makes it all kind of worth to sit through. There's a few movies that I've sat through in my life that are just so boring, but they have like interesting characters, and that kind of makes it a fun experience. But in terms of plot, like nothing happens, and or nothing that I haven't seen before. Um, and I think we already touched pretty well on like the celebrity factor. Some of these episodes, they're able to kind of bring it up a little bit. So let's hear Spongy's thoughts, BD, and then we'll move on to the dark episode.
Indeed. I think Maggie, and I could be wrong, but I think she also plays the love interest in Creature Feature. Joel Courtney's love interest.
Yeah, her name is Emma something, I want to say, and
Yeah.
she was in 3 episodes. She was in season 1 episode. I forget what is it. Is it the Ghostly Stare or?
Oh, yep.
She was in
Ghostly
Ghostly Stare and Creature Feature.
Yeah, we don't
Oh,
talk about the
no.
Ghostly.
Wait, she's in more episodes?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the guy who plays the nerd, what is his name? He's in
Nick Percha.
yeah, he's in Mascot, and he's also in something else.
He
Yeah,
always plays the
he's
nerdy guy.
cool. He's cool in Mascot.
All right. So for Terrible Love, he says this episode is generally good. One of the main things carrying is the acting. Nick Percha watching Spooksville and the one guy in Mascot, I guess, correct. Works as a nerdy nice guy. Emma Grabinski makes Maggie likable, despite what she does to David. DeLuise steals the show as Cupid, but he's charming and even has a couple decently dramatic / menacing moments. True. A bit about humans wanting more is well done. The plot does the job in showing how this goes too far and is swift by getting us into the right way. The music tries too hard to be quirky, and Brendan's can be a bit over the top. Kind of the point though, but he can be legit creepy at times. I find this the kind of thing especially creepy, and while it's not the best take, it works. It's weird how he survives that fall given Cupid's alone comment. True. Feels like he was gonna be dead, but the network said, nah. The twist is kind of mixed, as well as I like it and it makes sense. It feels cruel after what she's been through. At least Stuart will get what's coming to him, lol. So yeah, this one just feels like it's missing something, but it gets a job well done. Simply a good one, if unspectacular. Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards Spongy here.
I mean, like I said, I think it's okay. I mean, there's nothing really too wrong with it. I mean, it's fine, enjoyable. It's like watchable. I don't necessarily agree with Micah and Bruce's take here, but
No.
I'm still kind of in the middle and lukewarm with it. I'm not gonna say it's good or stick my neck out for it.
This is one of the ones that if you say it's trash, I won't be mad at you, and then if you like it, I also won't be mad at you. It's just a taste thing.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the more taste objective things we've touched on the podcast so far. Uh, Speaking of which, let's move over to a dark episode. Now, are you afraid of the dark episode? And I'm actually shocked on the feedback on this one. Our discourse in the Discord earlier, everybody seemed to be pretty positive with this one. I'll pass it over, or actually, I'll take this one about the Tale of the Last Dance. So, the Tale of the Last Dance, I kind of wish we compared to Phantom of the Auditorium and Another Alternate Reality when we did that one, because this one is definitely playing on Phantom of the Opera like Auditorium was. But I was shocked about how much I really enjoyed this one this go around. Um, I only saw this episode. I think I saw it when it aired when I was maybe 6 years old because it was on when I was watching like Animorphs on Nickelodeon. Yeah, I'm that old. Um, and I vaguely remember it. And then I watched it a few years ago. And watching it this time, it brought back some like hidden memories or something. But besides that, this has to be one of the best made Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes in terms of its directing. I already forgot his name. It'll come to me probably at some point, hopefully. But the guy who directed this episode, I have to tip my hat to him and give him some roses here, give him some flowers. He brought a pizzazz to this story that made it so tense. And this is not traditional tense in Are You Afraid of the Dark. Most of the time in Dark, it's very comparable to Goosebumps. It's just kind of goofy and kind of lackadaisical. But this one has a similar tone to another episode from the season prior to this one. This one was a final season 7 episode. There's a season 6 episode called The Tale of the Secret Admirer that just had a consistent eerie, something is wrong here tone. And this episode from the get-go just hits the ground running. You have this character named Tara. She's a violinist, and she's doing a recital, and something interrupts her recital, and she sees that her boyfriend's sleeping, and it catches her off guard, and she gets upset because she's practicing this recital to perform at her school's final dance called The Last Dance, which is supposed to commemorate this long-standing school that has gone into disarray over the years, that is pretty much falling apart. You see this pretty much disheveled school, and it's pretty accurate to the setting. I think they picked a great school location for this episode. It's kind of falling apart, so they're going to demolish it, and a shopping mall is going to buy up the land and put a shopping mall there instead. So this Last Dance they're the last class to ever go to this school. I mean, it means a lot to them. But somebody might be lurking in the walls. Somebody might be stalking this girl named Tara. And what you think this thing is for a majority of this episode is petrifying. I mean, he's wearing a cloak. You hear him breathing. He has some contraptions in the vents. He has some muffled up hands. His hands look like this. I'm not kidding. Like, his fingers look morphed together. There's something wrong here. He has some eerie plans going on while the dance is going on. He set up red paint that looks like blood and pours it on a girl's head. And the way these scenes are shot, like I said, are just masterfully done for this show's standards. And the layer of this being called the Lurker, that's what he's called on the wiki, is so well done. Probably one of the best set pieces in the show that I've seen. And it's so great, in my opinion, up until we get to the climax. Okay, and then the climax gets kind of weird. But yeah, that's what you're going to expect out of this. My only negatives with this episode is two things, right? The first thing is some icky implications. There's some very, very icky implications going on here that really serve no thematic meaning. They're just there in this plot. And it mostly has to deal with this guy called the Lurker. He's definitely in his 30s, because when you see the face reveal, this man looks like a 30-year-old Jacob from Twilight. I mean, I am not kidding. If you've ever seen the first Twilight movie when Jacob has his long hair before he became, like, cut his hair and got all muscular in the other movies, he looks exactly like that. I'm not exaggerating here. He's not even ugly, so that takes you out of it. But the icky implications about him, like, stalking this girl since she was a freshman, drawing pictures of her, making comments that, oh, you've grown into a fine young woman. And when the girl's boyfriend comes down into his lair to try to rescue her, he gets possessive and saying, you can't take her away from me. So he's trying to take this I'm not kidding. This is in the episode. He's a 17-year-old girl. He's trying to, like, possess her and, like, take her for his own. Very weird, and it serves no thematic purpose. And that kind of bleeds into the ending, which is kind of morbidly silly. But I think it fits the theme of the episode. I gave this one a high B. I think this was a B+ of an episode, especially for Dark standards. It managed to bring something to the table, especially in that classical Dark formula. And I think it's refreshing to see that in the final season. I give this one, I think, a 4.4 out of 5, which is like an 8.8 out of 10. Thought it was pretty good. Very good. So I'll pass it over to Micah first to follow up. What did you think about The Tale of the Last Dance?
I thought it was pretty enjoyable overall. It was kind of iffy in the beginning. I think all the acting from the kids is bad, and pretty much every character, in my opinion, isn't the best acted, especially the boyfriend. His acting was not good. Like, I don't know. It wasn't the worst acting I've ever seen again, but it just wasn't phenomenal. But now, despite the ewy implications of the Climax and the Lurker character. I do think they went for that more kind of heartwarming climax, and I think it does work in some ways if you look past the gross implications of what's going on. I think the Lurker character was very creepy, and they did a good job building him up and setting up this atmosphere. Those night scenes of him going through the school were very eerie, and I think really atmospheric and well done. And again, as you mentioned, it was a very well-made episode. I think the set design for the lair looked really cool. Even like the boiler room stuff they kind of hint at when they're going to his lair was cool. I just think there's a lot of really well-done elements to it. And I gave it like an 8 out of 10.
Well, that's good for you for dark standards. That's like one of the highest ratings I think you've given for a dark episode. So that's good. That's good. Great points, by the way. Even though I kind of disagree on the acting, I actually didn't mind the acting all that much. I thought they did a pretty serviceable job, especially for this show. So take that for what you will. Enthusiasts, let's hear your thoughts on The Tale of the Last Dance.
Oh man. Although I did actually decently like this one, probably like a 7.5 out of 10 final rating, maybe a 7. I gotta say, this has to be one of the best concepts in Dark I've seen so far, probably right behind Vampire Town. Right?
Yeah, Vampire Town.
Yeah. That I think is a lot better, but this is like a nice second place from what I've seen. Now, here's the thing. Kind of like what you said, the climax almost ruins some of the episode overall. I think that everything is basically fantastic, like 10 out of 10 work, until the climax comes, and it's not even that it's weird per se, which I can agree, it's like, why is this in here? But like, it also just is weird. And it also has that, I think I talked about this on our Christmas special, and it has that Jingle All the Way vibe, where the ending, I feel like, is terrible. And it's not just terrible and like, something that you're like, that was stupid. It's like, in Jingle All the Way, the criminal who tried to kill this kid, basically, or almost killed him multiple times, the kid's like, oh, here you go, here's the toy. That's stupid. All right? That, in my opinion, that is one of the worst endings I've ever seen, if not the worst. Well, this episode tries to do that again, except I guess has a better excuse, but still doesn't make sense, where the girl saves this kind of weird guy with the, the hands. And when he gets saved, he's like, thank you, and it just kind of wraps up there, I guess. But why would she save him? This guy is like trying to do terrible things. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I know it's trying to kind of play into that like loving theme, for Valentine's Day, but it's like, man, I could really use without this stuff. I want like a killer ending with something that also could have been used for this episode, but we just kind of chose differently. Was in an old story when the aunt dies. She literally dies. That is cool. And she deserves to die. And it has the same subject matter here. Old people should not like younger people. There you go. That's my opinion.
Well, that's a good opinion to have. But I think like the biggest push and pull is like he has that side where he's starting to be kind of sympathetic, and then that's like due to the writing, I guess, that gets thrown out the door as soon as the boyfriend comes back in the picture, where he's like, "Oh, you can't have her. She's mine," and he acts like he's gonna kidnap her. Like, make up your mind, story. Are you trying to be a gentle? Are you trying to be a gentle creature, or are you a monster? Like, you can't just be both. I mean, it kind of clashes, and that, like I said, the icky stuff doesn't really fit. You don't really need it there. You can just have him be the gentle one, and then just make it like that. Like, oh, I just like your music. But no, you have him drawing pictures of her and drooling and dropping a pencil. Mind you, this is the inciting incident of the episode. He's drooling and drawing a picture of her in a vent, lurking and spying on her while she's doing a recital. How creepy is that? I mean, like,
He's just
stalker
going.
alert. I mean, like, there's some like I said, the implication it serves nothing to the thematic message of the episode. It doesn't need to be in there. We'll pass it over to BD now. BD, what's your thoughts on the tale of the Last Dance?
This is the first time watch. It's not one of the episodes that I binged before, so this is the first time, and I enjoyed it. And I actually have a controversial take to the rest of you. I actually prefer the icky and more controversial stuff with the drawing, drooling, and his obsessiveness, because I thought it made him way creepier as a villain, way scarier, and it was more like YA horror in the first half of this episode. The whole idea of an obsessive stalker, the whole scene of that drool coming down from the top in pencil, that is real life horror. Discovering drawings of yourself in the attic of the cellar, real life horror, and it made him far more terrifying. And the fact that he looks like a damn bloodborne side character, he's horrifying. He's a creepy villain, and even his mannerisms was terrifying too. The fact that he acts childlike, the fact that he backs up and acts all timid, and then he has these moments where he shows off his little drawings and creations, and then he starts snapping and going crazy. That's creepy. And if you guys read YA horror, if you read adult horror, that stuff is in there. So if you like an old story, which has all those icky implications and stuff, but you don't like this one, that little bit kind of raises an eyebrow to me, because the whole reason why old story was so controversial and well liked is because it dealt with a real life horror. This is real life horror up until the point that this man takes off his cloak and he looks like the damn Dino Charge Blue Ranger Coda. This handsome caveman looking mother effer. I was like, this is not the bloodborne villain that you were showing 2 minutes ago. And then you got obviously her boyfriend, the Time Force Blue Ranger, fighting off Rancic. Nah, I'm playing. He does look like the Time Force Blue Ranger though. And yeah, I think that the first half of this episode is the strongest part. I think they should have kept up with the creepiness. And if you like Secret Admirer, there's a lot of creepy scenes like that in here. You got intense breathing scenes, you got stalking scenes. The red paint being dumped on her friend was creepy, and quite terrifying. And it's again a very scary episode, the same way Secret Admirer was. Secret Admirer is scarier. This one is creepier. It makes you more uncomfortable. It makes it more eerie. But then it all gets retconned within the first half. Like after that second half point, they try to make him into this sympathetic character. They try to make him the love interest. He somehow rizzes up Tara like this hunchback, porky pig fingered demon stalker, rizzes up this violinist in front of her boyfriend. Her boyfriend gets cucked in 4K up in that cellar. And she takes him back because as he has a fight scene, the Time Force Blue Ranger, Time Force fights off Rancic, kicks him off the ledge, and then he picks him back up and saves his life. And then he hands her the violin, like, here you go. And then all of a sudden, all of the problems that Tara had with her boyfriend, all the frustration she had with him, all the time she yelled at him, all the time she ran away with him, it was all forgiven because, oh my God, he's hot. And he said, here's your violin. The most cringy, stupid shit I've seen in Are You Afraid of the Dark? And that ending scene is cringe. And it's cringier than anything in Terrible Love because of the fact that they were trying to be serious with it. That slow dancing scene with this hobbit was supposed to be serious, and I just laughed out loud. I could not take it seriously. So this episode gets an 8 out of 10. Honest to God, if they would have kept that creepy, controversial part that I enjoy for most of it being more like young adult horror throughout it, much like they did with Secret Admirer and some of the implications in there, much like how Old Story is very controversial for being real life horror, I would have given this a 9 out of 10 or higher. This would have been in my top 10 episodes. The first half is extremely well made, extremely creepy, very, very eerie. And then it all of a sudden goes down that classic Are You Afraid of the Dark love story, which always has to be some kind of redemption story. It has to be corny. There's only a few dark episodes that haven't done that, and those ones stood out for being good. So this one felt like a missed opportunity. It's still a good episode, but I felt like it should have just went through the whole dark thing throughout the entire thing. They shouldn't have tried to redeem the main villain. And the actors do a good job. I like Tara. I like the characters. Her boyfriend is kind of like that classic stupid jock character. So I was a little bit mad seeing that trope again, but I think it's a good episode. I think you'd enjoy it. And if you're willing to, forgive the change in pace, you'll still enjoy it. But for me, This more so felt like a missed opportunity. They should have kept it creepy, should have kept it scary, and I think they would have made something fantastic. So if that's controversial, it is what it is, but I would have preferred that route.
Yeah, two things to add on there. When I say that the reason why it's icky because it doesn't fit into the thematic message of the story, that means that I don't mind that it's there if it had a thematic tie to the story. With stories like an old story, you have the themes of Tom and John, fear of growing old, growing up too fast. That plays into it, and that's openly there. But you don't have that here. You don't have that with Tar. You don't have that. And I feel like how they probably could have incorporated this love interest is that maybe it reminded him of a former love that he had or something, and maybe he's holding on to his past, and maybe that can tie into the school getting demolished. The school is literally holding on for dear life. It's holding on to its past. It's holding on to its legacy. And this lurker lives underneath this whole long-standing legacy, this last dance. That could have been a thematic tone to throw in there to kind of make the ickiness make a little bit more sense, but they didn't do that. It feels like it's there without some connection to a thematic message. And that's what kind of rubs me the wrong way with it. If it did have it, sure. Secret Admirer is another example where the ickiness does have a thematic message. It's about, living your parents' mistakes. You got to pay for your parents' mistakes or your grandparents' mistakes. It kind of plays into that. So that's why that stuff is kind of forgiven. Here, it's just something that I can't really overlook because, like I said, it's just not there. And then the second thing is with the boyfriend, yeah, them kind of forgiving each other is cringe, but there is that moment where he's kind of like, he's coming down into the lair and he kind of eavesdrops on a conversation. And you can tell that it's being directed to him about like things that he's done wrong. And he kind of sits there and reflects a little bit. And that's just a little enough to let me give him a little pass, them getting back together. Because that gives me some hope that maybe he did some reflection, or maybe he listened to what they had to say, and maybe he'll change for the better. But that's something that you can't really add to the discussion here because you don't know if that happens because the ending doesn't show any of that. So, but like I said, I'll give a mild pass to that. BD, you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I was actually going to argue that the reason why that ickiness didn't have a thematic significance is because of the fact that the writer and producer decided to change the direction of the story towards the climax. So I think that if they would have kept it creepy throughout, you would have gotten a better woven story. And it's not like they're not capable of that. Again, they wrote Secret Admirer. They have some good writers. They could have came up with that same moment with the boyfriend where, let's say, instead of this hermit character voicing his feelings, let's say that Tara, in this life or death situation, because of the guy's weird obsessiveness, she starts venting out her feelings because this is the only guy who's willing to listen to her because he's obsessed with her, compared to her boyfriend who's obsessed with himself and is not going to listen to her. So you could have had a scene with Tara venting her feelings, the guy listening, and you still could have had that eavesdropping scene. But the main problem with the episode, which is why I get that it didn't have a thematic tie, but I felt like that's more so the writer's fault, is because if they would have kept it the same tone, you could have had this background story as to the villain. You could have given him the sinister past. And again, we're horror fans. We know there's a lot of psychopathic villains out there that they have a very childish mentality, but they do bad things and they're very misguided. This could have been one of those directions. But then they decided to make him this redeeming figure and add, further to injury, they made him handsome. This terrifying, porky fingered, demonic hermit. They decided to make him this. They gave him this handsome Squidward reveal when he took off his cloak like a damn bride getting ready for the wedding. And I was like, why did you completely just 180 the direction? So I felt like if they would have kept it creepy throughout, we would have got some reasoning, but they didn't really know what they wanted. And it, again, wasted potential in my opinion. But it's
Yeah,
still good. It's still good.
I definitely like that we keep comparing this to Secret Admirer because Secret Admirer is literally the perfect package for this type of story that I think it was trying to go for, but like we said, the writers just chose not to send it home and swing for the fences. They just said, okay, let's just go to the safe route. We're just going to abandon all this. We don't need to get too dark. We already tried this with an episode of season prior. let's just keep it more, typical dark stuff. And I think that was the biggest detriment to the episode. They could have given the lurker a scarier design. They could have put a prosthetic on him. They could have done a Jake the Snake type of ending and killed him. They could have had more thematic messages that tie into a deeper twist, like Secret Admirer. They would have had all that. This honestly could have been the best episode. It's easily the best made by far, one of the best made. If it had all those qualities, it would have been a home run. Just didn't have it. Just didn't have it. And I'm curious now because we keep talking about this. I want to hear what Spongy has to say about this because Spongy usually is the make or break with a lot of this stuff.
I'm excited to hear what he has to say because he was surprised by our feelings of this episode. So let's see what he has to say. Oh my God, this man wrote an essay. Jesus Christ. All right. Taken from my season 7. Okay, so he's just saying one of them is outdated, but you'll know warnings on. Okay. Oh boy. This episode is super cheesy, but I liked it for that reason. As a story, it does feel half-baked. For one, this is really just Phantom of the Opera. There's not too much new for those already familiar with it. It's weirdly paced as it sets up things well, but it takes a while for the lurker to get fully involved. When this happens, we spend a lot of time with Michael trying to get to her as we know where she is, and we are drip-fed the scene with the lurker who has no real name and no big backstory. It turns out he's not real ugly at all face-wise, which is sort of the point, but it makes this moaning rather silly and it kind of misses the point of the story. We needed some bonding time and more action when the boyfriend comes in. The guy is a real jerk and is given this happy ending for him. He could have had his badness toned down instead of falling asleep during the recital because he doesn't see her dreams as realistic. I like that he is the one to save the lurker, though. It's nice. The whole thing is very melodramatic, and that will either be charming or annoying. I found it charming with how far they go with the music and all that. The ending especially gets corny, true. Even showing clips from earlier which highlight how thin the story kind of was. It being a take on a classic story does help. It gives it a certain gravitas with how deep they're trying to make it. I suppose it doesn't totally work unironically, but it is done so sincerely, and I can't help but enjoy it. Even if I assume y'all will inevitably hate it. Oh, turns out it's quite different, Spongy. It's a weird one, but I say I like it just for how charming and cheesy it is. This one I bet is super subjective, so it can go either way depending on your taste. Either way, I can't deny that they tried, for as corny as it can be. Not the best story for Andy to end on, but still better than Misfortune Cookie. Speaking of Andy, the stuff with him and Megan is nice. Also, the lurker has mild predator vibes with his comments of making her grow up to be a fine young woman, which makes his age weirdly ambiguous. Although I see he's in the same age bracket as her, although I hope he's in the same age bracket as her, this being a teen girl played by a 21-year-old. Oh, and the actor was 33 at the time. What? Okay, so I did want to comment on one thing Spongy did say because he did have a lot of good points. However, I'm going to disagree with you, Spongy, on one thing. This episode, let me get my camera back on. This episode is not cheesy and it's not corny. And I have to say, Phantom of the Auditorium's book and this is like comparing Disney World to Christmas Land from Nosferatu by Joe Hill. They are much different in tone and structure and how creepy it is. Phantom of the Auditorium's book is basically like a giant Scooby Doo mystery, and the Phantom poses no real threat. He's just sabotaging the play. And in the episode, they give him more flair, they make him creepier, more kind of epic. And then he has this moment where he says, I'm going to drag my lover into the abyss, which it's a kid show. They can't say hell, but he's kind of saying he's going to drag this girl into hell. And in this episode, yeah, you have the predator, you have the ickiness stuff in it. But in this episode, he's super creepy. He's super intimidating. He plays traps with the kids. He kidnaps her. He threatens to kill her boyfriend. He's drooling on her notes. He's watching her, spying her, drawing her. Heck, when he takes out the cloth and it's a dinner, I don't know about y'all, but when he took off that cloth and I saw the dinner there, I was like, wow, this guy is a genuine psychopath. And I got excited. I was like, bro, they're making him like a real villain, real predator. Like he thinks that he's about to go on a date with her. This is all within his psychotic world. And if you compare that to Phantom, Phantom is just a Scooby Doo villain. He's just trying to ruin a play. He's just trying to cause some pranks. So this one is not corny until the ending. While Phantom, it's pretty much corny throughout, and the episode is still corny, but it just makes it more digestible.
Yeah, and another thing that I think, the reason why I don't think this is corny is because the first person POV shots in this episode are done in such a tense and serious way that I can't see how that's corny at all. I mean, you remember the scene in the bathroom where he's one of the most chilling scenes I've ever seen in Are You Afraid of the Dark history. Has to go to this. This man is chilling in a vent in the girl's bathroom. He breaks the vent, takes his girl's violin case, pulls it in, and then he just waits in the shadows as the girls come up to the vent, and they both poke their faces in, and he's breathing, and they can't see a thing in there. How creepy is that? And you see his first person POV doing this. It just there's something about it that just feels off and unsettling. I just don't see how that's corny. Maybe the paint scene in the drooling stuff can be considered corny, but even then, I don't think that is as corny as anything we got in Auditorium. Auditorium is very, very corny. Bruce and BD, you have something you want to add?
Yeah. Go ahead.
What if the drool wasn't drool?
Pause.
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 Keep it PG, Bruce.
PG, Bruce.
Pause.
All right, BD.
Okay, it did not hit me until now, but I have the epiphany. You know why this episode is so effective? And it just clicked with me. You know why I love the fact that this guy is genuinely creepy and kind of icky? You know what the first person breathing scenes reminded me of? Black Christmas. Black Christmas has a lot of those creepy, ominous breathing, spying on women in the shadows, very unnerving, very dark scenes. This guy had those scenes in it. And I think you mentioned Carrie as well. So the fact that this episode is taking from adult horror, making it into like YA horror, and still sprinkling in that kids kind of PG goofy acting, honest to God, if they would have kept this throughout, this probably would have been the darkest and probably a 10 out of 10. Like, I'm noticing all the stuff that they're taking from adult horror. And those stalker scenes, similar to Black Christmas, is very creepy. And that's what it reminds me of. So I'm glad you brought up that ventilation scene because that didn't even pop up in my mind. But when you said the breathing scene and him waiting there, spying on the girls, I'm like, that's in Black Christmas. The very similar scenes in there with that.
That has to be one of the creepiest dark scenes ever. And in a lot of ways, this episode feels kind of similar in quality to some of the better earlier season ones, like seasons 1 through 5, like the genuinely creepy ones. It feels on par with those, like Night Shift or the one what is it called, Dark Music. The really dark ones. It has the same vibe. It just there's something about it. I just don't see how people could say it's corny. I mean, I think Dark Music is honestly more corny than this was. And it has a darker twist, but still, you know, I just don't see it. But yeah, that's a pretty good thought. So I guess we'll get into the face-off. Judging by everybody's comments, I don't know about Spongy. Spongy might say that he likes Terrible Love more, but given all of our thoughts, I think all four of us think that Last Dance is better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna give Dark a win here, like a pretty good win here. I mean, comparing, for the Valentine's special, there's not a lot to pick from in kids horror, so it's kind of, I don't know. One of them feels more in that goofy decom kind of way, and one of them feels more serious in a young, pseudo young adult type of way. So it's almost kind of night and day comparing these, which could be considered unfair, but I think the where it counts here is the tonality and the quality and consistency of product. And I think Dark delivered a more serious in true horror story for Valentine's Day than Haunting Hour is able to produce. So Dark wins by a fair victory here. All right. So because it's Valentine's Day, we decided to keep this discussion short and sweet. We're going to talk about Valentine's Day horror and some stuff that we really love in the genre. And I'm going to pass it to Bruce first for this one. Bruce, what is some of your favorite Valentine's Day horror out there?
All right, so the first one is actually a really recent read. Review is up on my channel if you are interested in more thoughts. But My first Fear Street book too, and that is Fear Street Super Chiller Broken Hearts. Folks, this surprisingly, I actually didn't think I would like that much given the first 30, 40 pages. As it kind of goes on from like, I'm going to say like page 100 all the way to, I think it's 220 pages long. That's some really great stuff right there. The length is definitely deserved. I think that this definitely deserves to be a super chiller if you didn't know. Basically longer Fear Street books. This has a lot of stuff it tries to jam into it all at once. And although it can sometimes lead to not the greatest stuff and it kind of lowers the score, I think that at the same time this utilizes so many great characters, some of them, not Josie. Not Josie, but some of them are awesome. And I really like the twists and turns. They are all throughout this book, except they don't use it to the point where it's confusing. They use it to the point where you're scared and you don't know what's going to happen to some of these characters that you were rooting for. So, really like that. I'm really excited to read more Fear Street. Besides that, I decided to talk about a Goosebumps book. Now, I already mentioned this a couple times on this podcast so far, but How I Learned to Fly. This honestly shouldn't even be called a horror story, but it's in the Goosebumps series. I think it qualifies, at least for the most part. And, it does have some pretty creepy moments. I'd actually say they're not creepy per se, but you're kind of shocked and you're scared about what's going to happen to the characters, specifically Jack, who is the main in this book, and he is really great. I really like Jack. Wilson cannot say the same for. He's kind of annoying at parts. This book has some pretty wild moments. We're not going to talk about the length scene, but basically everything in this book is pretty fun. I liked it, and half of me wishes I would have saved this for February, but I just kind of didn't. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm happy I read it when I did. This was a fun break from the casual Goosebumps stuff that kind of just keeps rolling in throughout the original series. And then you kind of get this as a break. You go from the 50s are a pretty wild, I guess, set of 10 in the Goosebumps OG series, because you kind of go from like Calling All Creeps, pretty typical, Beware the Snowman, then this, and then Chicken, which say what you want about that, but then Don't Go to Sleep. I think it was pretty experimental in this kind of age of Goosebumps. So yeah, I really recommend it. It's not the usual Goosebumps book that you're probably expecting. So yeah, those are my two picks. Highly recommend them. If you own either of them, read them tomorrow or today. I don't know.
All right, great picks. I love How I Learned to Fly. That's one of my favorite Goosebumps books. I think it's one of the better written ones. Even though like there are some things I have to kind of overlook, I do think that Jack and Wilson are both annoying in the book at certain points. But I do kind of like how the story wraps up and it redeems a lot of that for me. So let's keep passing it around. BD, what is some of your favorite Valentine's Day horror?
Now, the two picks that I have are actually in my Hall of Fame for kids/YA horror. I might say YA because they're closer to YA horror, but they're still kind of kids horror. And gotta give shout out to the Champion Rings. Two stories here. One of them, I think me and Completionist suspected would have been a ripoff per se of the older story. And the older story is just brilliant. So let's start with the ripoff that is actually my favorite story in the Haunting Hour. And this is going to be a podcast episode we do in the future. And it'll include these two. And the first one is The Dead Body. The Dead Body from Haunting Hour is my favorite Haunting Hour episode I ever watched, and I never saw it as a kid. I watched it for the first time as an adult, and it is amazing. So the story is basically about this kid who's nerdy. He gets picked on. He's not like a geek kid, but he's kind of like that more emo, kind of melodramatic kid who gets picked on by bullies that kind of torment him. And he has this girl who's played by Tierra Scovby. Now Tierra Scovby, that's my Valentine. 100% would have went crazy. I need the love bug syndrome for that woman right there because she's amazing. Shout out to Tierra. But basically, he's trying to get noticed by her. She ignores him completely, doesn't even know he exists. She's nice to him, but he has no chance. And then he meets this guy in this alleyway. And basically what happens is these two bullies are picking on him and they get scared off. And he meets this dude who has slick back hair. He has a leather jacket. He looks real stylish and handsome. And his name is Jake Skinner. And Jake Skinner is played by Matt Angel. For those of you who don't know, that is Dan Angel's son. Dan Angel worked on Goosebumps, worked on Haunting Hour, worked on other stuff. That's his son playing the villain. And Jake Skinner is one of the best villains in all of Haunting Hour. He's got charisma, he's lovable, he's Chad Thundercock, and on top of that, he's terrifying. He manipulates reality, he can transform, and his origin story for what happened to him is extremely dark. Deals with death, deals with a horrifying, terrible death, and him getting revenge and him trying to get back a life that was taken from him. This episode's super dark, super creepy. That scene in the forest where the bully was getting attacked by Jake is horrifying as well. And then confronting the other one at the gym, that was terrifying. But this episode was actually, I think, inspired by an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode from season 6, one of the few good episodes from season 6, and that is The Tale of the Secret Admirer. The Tale of the Secret Admirer, fantastic. 10 out of 10, perfect. This story basically, I think, inspired The Dead Body because it also deals with the villain who looks a lot like Jake Skinner, has a half-burnt face, kind of looks like the Terminator, and there's this girl who also is not noticed by guys. She meets this jock who's sort of more sympathetic, and as she starts trying to be attracted to him, she starts getting these love letters in her locker. And these love letters are stalker letters. They're very creepy, very eerie, makes her uncomfortable. Again, real life horror. And then there's this break-in scene. This break-in scene in this episode in her house is genuinely terrifying. This scene is so scary that you could have made it into a scary stories to tell in the dark urban legend. I would not be shocked if this could have been an urban legend in a sense because the way it's shot is horrifying. And I was genuinely terrified throughout it. And then when you find out the history of this girl's family, maybe the ties to the villain, what happened in this school, you get this epic finale that deals with 2 generations of family, 2 generations of stalker, one real, one supernatural, and it's just epic. So those would be my picks. Those are 2 love stories. And yeah, if you want to watch anything that gets your baby mama to hug you a little bit tighter for how scary it is, I would suggest you watch those 2.
Great picks, BD. Great. Secret Admirer would be one of mine, but I'm going to let Micah go first because I want to save mine for last. Micah, what are some of your favorite Valentine's Day horror stories?
Well, I've not actually seen a lot of Valentine's Day horror, so I'm very unfamiliar with the genre. But
Okay.
the couple I would say what BD brought up with the Dead Body, I actually think Dead Bodies, the sequel episode that's later on, I really like that one a lot because I mean it's probably one of the darkest episodes as well, much like Dead Body, and has some of the most disturbing and horrifying imagery I've ever seen in a kid's horror thing, which is the way that this Grim Reaper comes back for Jake Skinner and marks him. And throughout this episode, Jake is slowly rotting away and turning back into a corpse. And some of the imagery, especially at the end when the Grim Reaper like grabs Jake's head and his whole face just rots away as he's screaming in agony, like, Jesus Christ, Haunting Hour! Like they really were not holding back on that one. And just the way he kind of is very manipulative and abusive towards the love interest. Like, and it's just really intense, and the stuff they do in it is quite adult for a Haunting Hour episode. And I really do like the way they handled all that stuff. The other one, for me, it's not technically Valentine's Day themed, but it has that kind of romantic era around it. The episode of Bride of the Living Dummy. That is one of my favorite Goosebumps episodes of all time, and in my opinion, it is the best Slappy episode. I really love it. I think it's probably the darkest and scariest version of Slappy we've gotten. It has some, well, there are some cringy moments with Mary Ellen. I will admit, Mary Ellen stuff is kind of cringy, but the whole thing with how he manipulates Jimmy O. James and the stuff he does around the house and some of the imagery of like Slappy in the vents, like that, I don't know, that always has stuck with me. And of course, the iconic twist ending that has probably scarred many children, including myself. I don't know. I just love it. There's just something about it that I just really enjoy.
Yeah, let's take a moment to reflect on the 90s when they put Bride of the Living Dummy and an old story on a VHS collection. Just think about the implications of that. Like, sometimes when you think back on that, seems so on purpose, or, it could have been a coincidence, but no way. Ain't no way. They could have picked any other episode to put with Bride, and they put an old story. That had to be some exec in 20th Century Fox making like some joke and be like, "Hey, let's put these on a VHS," and somebody actually took them seriously. But but yeah, looking back on it, that is kind of a controversial thing to call Valentine's, because we often make the joke that an old story and Bride are the best Valentine's Goosebumps books, because Goosebumps doesn't really have Valentine's stories other than like How I Learned to Fly, or love themed stories. So like in kids horror, for me, I think the biggest thing for me is like, where are you gonna find these? Like, what stories actually fit in this? BD's already mentioned one. One of my favorites is Secret Admirer, Tale of the Secret Admirer. Easily my second favorite Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. That and Vampire Town are like the big two. Night Shift is number 3. Then Water Demons is number 4. Like those are the big 4 for me from that show. Um, Secret Admirer is just genuinely perfect for what it is. It's probably, in terms of packaging, probably the scariest episode in kids horror, I think, that I've ever seen personally, just because of what it's able to do, like blending in realism, blending in some real life, horror, mixing it in with a threatening villain, some creepy, legitimately disturbing scenes that you would see in like slasher movies or genuine horror movies. It's just next level. And the theme about her getting anonymous love letters fits enough into Valentine's. I mean, that's what you're basically doing when you give a Valentine. You're giving an anonymous love letter, right? It's in the spirit. And I don't know, it's just something about it. It's just so electric. You'll know what we're talking about if you've seen the episode. But my staple, I'm actually going adult horror here, is the My Bloody Valentine franchise. And I have my Bloody Valentine 3D Blu-ray here. The original and the remake I love for both different reasons. As a matter of fact, tomorrow they have a comic series being released by American Mythology, a My Bloody Valentine comic story building on to the first original movie. This has always been my Valentine's Day horror for many years. I remember watching this movie a lot when I was a kid. Now, if you do watch the remake, y'all, this is not safe for kids horror. So if you're not used to kids horror or me talking about things outside of kids horror, click off for a little bit. But this is a movie with graphic nudity in it for about 10 minutes. There's a whole scene with a nude woman for about 10 minutes long. Just know that if you're going to go into this, pretty graphic kills. I love it because it has some textbook adult horror actors in this that I love. Big one is Tom Atkins. He was in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. He was in Maniac Cop. He was in Night of the Creeps, some of my all-time favorite horror movies. Seeing him here is awesome. Some of the kills in here are amazing. You have Jensen Ackles from Supernatural. You have Jamie King, Kerr Smith. Kerr Smith was in Final Destination. Jamie King was in a few horror movies of her time. A lot of cool horror alum. The original one has Don Franks, who played the Swamp Hermit in Werewolf of Fever Swamp's episode. So every time I watch the original, I always get a kick out of that. And that one was one of the earliest like textbook slashers of the 1980s. And it definitely plays more into the Valentine's theme than the remake does. But yeah, both I love, and I watch them every year. Matter of fact, I already watched the original. I just got to watch this one. But yeah, those are my 2 picks. So I think that wraps up this episode, y'all. I think we've talked about Valentine's Day horror, and we compared 2 classic Valentine's Day themed kids horror episodes. So now we're going to kind of shift back into the normal mix of things, but we're actually going to do something mildly different. We're going to be doing a Goosebumps short story for our next episode. And for our first one, we decided Don't Wake Mummy. We're going to be facing off Don't Wake Mummy with an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode called The Tale of the Guardian's Curse. And our topic is going to be some of our favorite mummy movies, because there's so many mummy movies out there from Universal alone. There's so many decom movies around mummies. There's animated mummy movies. There's so much in the subgenre that we should probably give it some more exposure. And most definitely, I will be bringing up Under Wraps, the original one from 1997, when we get to that. Until next time, we hope you all take care. If you have time, please like this video. I will have the contact information and where you can reach all of us on our channels, on our socials, put into the description and in the comment section of this video. If you're not subbed, we would all appreciate subscribe and maybe hit the notification bell if you like our content. Please go show these other guys some love. I know Goosebumps Enthusiast recently hit 150 subs. I want to get him up to a few hundred more. Please go sub up Ultimate Goosebumps, man. He's great guy. He's doing the OG 62 in a row. We got to get him through some more books, hopefully, because I love watching his reviews on those. And then we got BD Horror. He's just a mixture of a lot of things on his channel. But man, this guy's comedy gold. You can't beat his entertainment value in the community. Please go sub these guys up. I wish that they had the same amount of subs as me. They all deserve it. They're good people. And also go sub up Dummies and go sub up Spongy, or go follow Spongy on his Twitter account, because he has a blog and he has a lot of great stuff on there that he's covered over the years. Very knowledgeable guy, great friend that I met. Yeah, I have a lot of positive things to say about these guys, and I can go on forever. But yeah, until next time, take care, everyone. Have a good night, and we can't wait to see you all in the next one. Peace.